Good afternoon. I'm Gerardo Viviers from the NCC Registration Services Department. First thing we're going to talk about is the amount of members that have joined over the past months. As you can see, the growth has become kind of almost logarithmic. We have more than 9,500 members. This has been quite a strong growth over the past months. This is due mostly because of the IPv4 depletion. Since we don't have any more address space to give out, and the only way is to become a member, then we see that the amount of membership has increased. Of the total amount of members, almost half of them is constituted by LARs or members in Russia, the UK, Germany, Italy, and France, with the Ukraine forming a 1.7% of the total membership. Out of the new members that joined in the past 6 months, the most of them came out of the UK, followed by Germany and France. Russia has around 4% new memberships, and the Ukraine contributed with 2.3% of the new members. If we zoom in, if we focus onto the members in the region, we can see that most of them are located in Russia. Almost 3/4 of all the members in this region. If we zoom into the rest, we can see that almost half of the rest belongs to the Ukraine, with smaller amounts in the rest of the region. From the address space distributed, and this isn't really much different than what we presented in the ENOG6 meeting a couple of months ago, most of the allocations have been made to LARs in Russia, followed up by Ukraine and the rest of the region. We can see that there's a little bit of the difference between IPv4 allocations and IPv6 allocations. The ideal situation would be if both columns would be the same size, but that's not happening just yet. If we zoom into the countries outside of Russia, we can see that the Ukraine has the most amount of IPv4 allocations made, with IPv6 coming up quite fast. Regarding PI assignments, Russia and Ukraine hold the most amount. This hasn't really changed much in the last months because we are not making any more PI assignments. It's interesting to see that the amount of IPv6 PI assignments is not at the same height. So that might have to do with the different policies between v4 and v6. As for autonomous system numbers, Russia and Ukraine again are holding the most amount of AS numbers, with Russia holding almost 5,000 of them. Since we reached depletion last year, the policies changed a little bit, and the last/8 policy kicked in. This means that from that last/8 block, we allocate only one block of a /22 size to each LAR, be it an additional allocation or a first allocation. To get this last block, LARs must have already an IPv6 allocation from an upstream LAR or directly from the RIPE NCC. And up to now, we've made 2,082/22 allocations, with an addition of 15 IXP assignments, 2 of them located in Russia. We can see that the trend over the past months since we reached depletion, at first it was growing, and as the blocks are given out, because each one can get only one of them, this trend will be decreasing over time. Same thing goes with the first allocations and additional allocations. Until we reach depletion, the additional allocations grew almost exponentially. And as we give out the /22 blocks, this trend will decrease. So we'll see more first allocations happening and not so much additional allocations. Now, what happens to the people who need more address space? There are several ways to get this. There are 3 types of intra-RIR transfers. One of them is mergers and acquisitions, transfers allocations using the transfer policy, and legacy space transfers. For mergers and acquisitions, when an organization is purchased or partially purchased by another organization, the resources that were used for the network of that organization can be transferred to the new holder. For this, we need documentation, for example, the merger purchase agreement or contract, the company registration papers, and maybe some new independent end-user assignment agreements in case there are provider independent resources involved. For the transfer of allocations using the policy, now the policy sets some restrictions or requirements. The transfer can be only between LARs, so between members of the RIPE NCC. The IP addresses should not be in use, and the receiving LAR must justify the need for the block. They can do this with an additional allocation request to the RIPE NCC. And the transfer can be permanent or temporary. Legacy space transfers, this is a bit more complicated because legacy space is address space that was given out before the RIR system came to place. The RIPE NCC is able to support this type of transfers when there is a legacy space agreement in place. When there's no agreement, the RIPE NCC will not get involved. And if you're asking yourself, where can I find all this IPv4 address space that's out there unused? Well, the RIPE NCC has the listing service available. It's only for members, so LARs can find it in their LAR portal. And what they'll see there is members who are offering address space, IPv4 address space, and members who are requesting IPv4 address space. Up to now, we see that the amount requested is a lot of times more than the amount offered, which makes it a bit difficult. And the trend over the past months, we can see that we've been doing a lot more transfers, not only in amount of transfers, but also in size of blocks transferred. In May, we can see that there was a huge amount of transfers requested. And in July, there was a bit less, but the amount transferred was much more. We've also completed a lot of mergers. In ENOG6, the trend seemed to be that there would be a lot more mergers happening, but we can see that the trend now is decreasing. Most of the mergers occur in the fourth quarter, so we'll have to see what happens in the next 3 months to actually make a statement. And let's have a quick look at what's happening in the policy development area. There are 2 policies that were recently accepted and implemented. The first one is transparency in address block transfers, which requires the RIPE NCC to publish records of all the transfers conducted according to the policy. You can find that on our website. You can see which LAR transferred which block to which LAR. And the revert of run out fairly. Up until depletion and a couple of months later, the policy said that the allocation and assignments should be for 3 months. This policy reverts that, and so it goes back to the 12 months originally in place. There are a couple of policy proposals that are being discussed, which would have a little bit of impact on the whole IPv4 transfer market. The first one is the policy for inter-RIR transfers of IPv4 address space. This would describe how IPv4 address space would be transferred from one RIR to another RIR. At this moment, the policy proposer is on hold, awaiting another policy, which I'm going to comment a bit in a few slides. And the other one is the no restrictions on end-user assignments and intra-RIR transfers. This would allow allocations to be transferred from one LAR to another if the address space is in use. So allocations that are in use can be transferred to another LAR. And the 2 other policy proposals which are being discussed and quite actively are the no need, post-depletion reality adjustment and cleanup, which would remove the needs-based requirements for IPv4 delegations, and the RIPE NCC services to legacy internet resource holders, which would set up a framework for the RIPE NCC to be able to provide services to legacy space holders. And last but not least, which was presented last week, we have the PA-PI unification for IPv6 address space, which aims to unify 3 different RIPE documents into one document for all IPv6 address space. And basically what the proposers want is to remove the difference between PI and PA for IPv6 address space. Now, we encourage everybody to actively participate in the policy discussions because if a policy is accepted and implemented, it might have some impact on your business. If you're interested in knowing more, approach us afterwards outside and we can tell you a lot more about the policy development process. And I'm almost reaching the end, but please bear with me. The contractual policy, that is the famous 2007-01 policy, which requires end users that have PI resources to sign contracts with LIRs for the sponsorship of the resources. We are already in the phase 3 since the beginning of 2011, and that's when we have to approach the end users directly ourselves. Now, as we explained in the ENOG6, we have several challenges to be able to carry out this task. And one of them is the familiarity of people with the RIPE policies and the RIPE NCC. They don't know who we are, they don't know what the RIPE policies are, and we have to spend some time explaining to them why we're knocking on their doors. We also have a lot of time and effort put into identifying who the legitimate resource holder is. This means that we have to ask for documentation and maybe ask for historical documentation when companies have changed. And one of the biggest challenges is ensuring the continuity of active networks that are using resources that might be reclaimed. The red line that we see here on the left side is our target. That is the total amount of resources that should have contracts in place. As you can see, we've been working quite hard over the past years, and we're trying to reach our goal as fast as possible. Over the past 6 months, we've processed a whole lot of resources, more than 3,000. Some of them were assigned to LARs, so we've changed them to infra. Others have produced documentation, so they've become approved docs, and a percentage of them have been returned to the free pools. Even though we've processed quite a lot, we still have more than 6,000 resource holders that we have to approach. One of the side effects of the policy is that now we have also a lot of work for the maintenance of these resources. And by maintenance, I mean changes between LARs when an end user decides to pass from one LAR to another one, when they change their names and change their status, thus become an LAR, and we move the resources to the registry, and when they have to be returned. All this is also a side effect of the policy. Now, the RIPE NCC is committed to keeping the registry clean and strong. So we've reviewed our auditing activities, and we've rebranded it as Assisted Registry Check. Now, our main goal is to keep the registry strong and clean, and we also want to reduce the workload for LARs. So what we are going to be doing is proactively contacting them and producing an overview report of what we have found in the RIPE database and in the registries. For example, an overview of registered information, contact details that might be out of date, an overview of the consistency of the internet resource, for example, if there are overlapping assignments, an overview of the reverse delegation and route objects consistency. And our goal is to assist the LARs with improving the data accuracy with as much effort from our side as we can, and trying to alleviate the workload on them. We see this as a great opportunity for LARs to ask us and talk about policies, RIPE policies, how to register objects in the RIPE database, and using the RIPE NCC tools, which we have a lot of them. And on a sad note, we have to talk about something quite unpleasant that has happened in the past months. Due to an end-user report, we came across the fact that a couple of resources have been hijacked. The hijackers seem to be targeting unannounced resources, and they sort of abused long-established processes. They have a very sophisticated approach which involves several layers of camouflaging their tracks. We have taken steps in response to this. Basically, we are updating our processes as appropriate and reverting the changes when we have found that they are unauthorized. We are also considering reporting the illegal activities to the authorities when this is found to be needed. And where the member involvement can be proven, we consider the closure of the LIR account and the deregistration of the resources. In the case that there is a dispute, there's always a way to escalate this, in first instance to the RIPE NCC management for a final decision. And if that is not resolving the issue, they can always object to the arbiters panel. Now, what does this mean for everybody else? This means that we have to find a balance between doing due diligence, so making sure that the resources are in the legitimate hands, and maybe going a little bit to the other side and becoming a bit overly strict, bureaucratic, or inflexible. So there are many cases where the proof of ownership could be difficult to demonstrate, and end users might experience that we are becoming a bit more strict in our processes, but this is only for their own good. What can you do to avoid hijacks? Well, first of all, protect your resources against hijacking by making sure that the information in the RIPE database is up to date and that the RIPE database objects are correctly protected. If you need help or think your resources may have been compromised, you can always contact us at lir-help@ripe.net. Thank you. Any questions?
Two questions from the IRC. First is, could you scroll back to the slide independent resources maintenance diagram? Yeah. What means greenfield status change?
Status change, that it changes, for example, from assigned to an end user to an LAR, so that they become an LAR and they have to
So the status change, you mean from PI to PA resource?
No. There's the status of the contract, if it's sponsored by an LAR or if it becomes infrastructure.
Thanks. And is this possible to change the status of anytime object from PI to PA?
That's something that's being discussed on the mailing list, and you should probably check there if there has been a conclusion made or not.
Thank you. Second question. Has been any registry closed due to address hijacking?
I don't know. Not at this moment.
Thanks.
Welcome.